Good evening. I'm John Wensky, Chairperson of the Shrewsbury School Committee, and welcome to our meeting for Wednesday, March 26, 2025. Tonight's meeting is being broadcast live on Selco Channels 29 and 329 and streamed live on Shrewsbury Media Connection's website. Thank you to Shrewsbury Media Connection and Liz Poplowski for their assistance with our broadcast. Tonight's meeting will be rebroadcast on SMC's website and their YouTube channel between now and our next scheduled meeting on Wednesday, April 9th. Before we begin tonight's meeting, I'd like to start by recognizing the passing of Mr. Hal Newman, who served honorably as a paraeducator at Oak Middle School for 20 years after he retired from his career as Vice President of Marketing at Hanover Insurance. Mr. Newman was a consummate gentleman, held in very high regard by the students he assisted and by his colleagues at Oak Middle School. And on behalf of the school district, we offer sincere condolences to his family and friends. Please join us in a moment of silence for Mr. Hal Newman. Thank you. First item on our agenda is public participation. Tonight, we have not received requests to speak at public participation. However, if anybody would like to speak at our next meeting, any and all residents that wish to address the committee regarding concerns pertaining to policy, budget, and the performance of the superintendent should reach out to the chairperson prior to the next meeting on April 9th. Next item on the agenda is chairperson and members' reports. Colleagues, anything to report today? No, I'd just like to, as my colleagues know, we had our FY26 budget hearing with Finance Committee on Saturday. I'd like to thank all the members of the Finance Committee, including some that are here tonight, just for their comments and their questions during our 90-minute presentation. I definitely encourage the public to watch the Finance Committee hearing that we presented on Saturday on the YouTube channel for Shrewsbury Media Connection. It's also worth noting that it was suggested during that meeting that the three boards in Shrewsbury have what's called a tri-board meeting, essentially Finance Committee, School Committee, and Select Board, to talk about the financial future of the town as it pertains to services. So we look forward to that. That sounds like it'll be coming up in April. So thank you. The next item on the agenda is Superintendent's Report. Dr. Sorter.
Thank you, Mr. Wensky. The district has begun the annual state MCAS testing. I just want to take this moment not only to recognize and thank our students for their hard work and our educators for preparing them for the exam just through excellent teaching of our curriculum throughout the year, but also it is a very heavy lift to prepare and administer this exam. It's done electronically, as the last few years. Our IT team goes above and beyond to make sure that they're available on site to troubleshoot. This year there's a new state vendor for the test, so there were some differences and things were a little hairy in the weeks leading up with some things that weren't quite there the way the previous program had been, but so far with sort of a couple of hiccups, it's been smooth in terms of the administration. The principals and assistant principals in the buildings, there is an enormous amount of work just preparing and leading up to make sure that all of the test administration goes appropriately well between scheduling, opportunities and where students are taking the test, all the registration pieces, the training of staff to do the proctoring. So it's a lot of work, and I do appreciate the efforts that people have put in to make that go as smoothly as possible. I also want to make a public announcement that's an excellent news story. I'm very pleased to announce that the Massachusetts School Nurse Organization, the MSNO, has awarded Noel Freeman, who is our Director of School Nursing, the award as the Massachusetts School Nurse Administrator of the Year for 2024-2025. Ms. Freeman is a locally award-winning leader who has done extraordinary work during her career in Shrewsbury, and look forward to her and her family being honored at the annual event that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education puts on to honor all the different teachers and staff and administrators of the year across the state that'll happen in the late spring. Ms. Freeman will be appearing in front of the committee for her annual report sometime later this spring, and I know she'll be embarrassed by this, so I wanted to announce it when she wasn't here. She can't escape it. But Noelle has been an extraordinary leader for the district. She actually is also retiring at the end of this year, and she leaves very, very large shoes to fill. So congratulations to Ms. Freeman on this outstanding recognition. That is Superintendent's report this evening.
Great. Thank you so much. The next item on our agenda is an acceptance of a gift and vote. Per school committee policy 911, gifts of $5,000 or more must be formally accepted by the school committee. Central One Federal Credit Union has offered to make a donation of $5,000 to defray outstanding student debt for families who qualify as low income. Tonight, along with Dr. Jane Lazant, we have two members from Central One Federal Credit Union I'd like to welcome today. Mr. Devin Lyon, who's the president and CEO of Central One, and Mr. David Kaiser, who's the SVP of Retail Services. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we are very grateful and appreciative to both Dave and Devin and their crew for initiating the idea of providing funding for unpaid student meals. The $5,000 donation will defray student debt for qualifying families. The debt was incurred prior to the state providing universal free meals to all students. And as all of you know, Central One has been an incredibly generous community partner over the years. In 2017, they donated $750,000 towards the SHS turf field project. The stadium is appropriately named Central One Federal Credit Union Stadium. During the course of this school year, Central One provided expansive meeting space at no cost for professional development training focused on positive behavioral interventions and supports. Approximately 80 educators, paraprofessionals, and school leaders across the district actively participated in this professional learning, and we are truly appreciative to Central One for providing not only the meeting spaces, but the parking spaces as we took up the entire parking lot. Their staff was very generous, and as you know, it's hard to find space available for training of this size or any size in our schools. So we're very appreciative to them for their kindness and patience, and this critical learning could not have been accomplished without their support. And finally, we thank them for their ongoing partnership with career fairs at our middle and high school levels. Last week, a member of their team participated in Lunch and Learn at Oak Middle School. She had over 30 students who enjoyed and appreciated having lunch and learning about her personal and professional journey. So we thank you, and Central Federal Credit Union. Central One.
It's absolutely our pleasure. I just want to say that, you never truly know the power of a school lunch. It's impressive the amount of work and the litany of things that educators have to take into account on a day-to-day basis. And then all of the challenges and opportunities that the students bring in each and every day. And it's absolutely an honor and a privilege to be a very small part of that, to be able to either donate time or money or knowledge. It's not lost on us that when we come in and we're able to do financial literacy training, you're giving us a small window into helping affect their lives. And we are honored to be a partner for the school, and whenever and however we can help, we are more than willing to continue to do that. So thank you for the very kind words, but it is our honor and privilege to be able to do it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Colleagues, any questions or comments? Ms. Fritz?
Just thank you very much for being such a strong community partner. I mean, it's really cliche, it takes a village, but it really does, especially now when we want students to have career and technical education and understand maybe they want to go into finance in college. And if they meet with members from your organization, that gives them a good understanding before that step. So thank you for all the donations, but also that community partnership is really the piece that I think is even more important. So thank you.
Ms. Heffernan?
Yeah, I also, of course, am deeply appreciative and just want to think, as I think about, in particular, what this is going to help defray student debt for families who their children needed to eat and they couldn't afford to pay the meal, right? And how at its core and how essential. And as was noted, the state made a really significant contribution recently to sort of change the policy there. So much so that our lunchrooms are overflowing, and when we think about our high school expansion, we need to increase the server rate, right? So we know kids need to eat. I'm a parent; my kids eat all of the time, so I understand this. But when I think about those families who got themselves into that place and what that means, and having that debt hang over their heads, I certainly hope and assume that we're doing all that we can to protect the kids from any of that stigma. But you're just helping to erase that and clean that slate, and so it's just very much appreciative. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your partnership with Shrewsbury Public Schools. I was on the turf field subcommittee back in 2017, and you played a major role in that. I was also the guest play-by-play for Shrewsbury football last November, and I was constantly reminded of your generosity as I was calling the game and letting everybody know where we were on the field. And certainly this donation is just outstanding. So thank you very much for your partnership with us. Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you. I've had the pleasure of working with Mr. Kaiser for many years, going back in connection with the Quarter 9 Chamber of Commerce, the work that Central One has done directly with the school district as well, and appreciate his continued support and work with us. It was a pleasure to meet Mr. Lyon and as the CEO and I think really was encouraging to hear that wants to continue the longstanding tradition in Central One of being supportive of our community generally, and especially through our school district. And I think that hunger is a really critical issue, and I know that as much as we have a very diverse community economically, and unfortunately we do have families and kids in our community who don't get enough to eat on a regular basis, and the school lunch program is really critical in finding a way to help families who are economically qualified to be able to erase some of that debt. I think is a terrific thing to do. So thank you, much appreciated. We look forward to the continued partnership together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we do need to vote on this generous gift. Therefore, I need a motion that the school committee vote to accept a gift of $5,000 from Central One Federal Credit Union to defray outstanding student debt incurred by families who qualify as low income.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is also a time-scheduled appointment. It is our SHS Student Advisory Committee report. Under the Massachusetts Education Reform Act, school districts are required to have a student advisory committee consisting of 5 high school students who are elected by the student body. The SAC is required to meet with the school committee during the year to review various issues of concern to the student body. This is the SAC's 3rd presentation to the school committee this year. And Mr. Andrew Smith, a Shrewsbury High School social sciences teacher who serves as the faculty advisor, is here tonight as well. And I'd like to welcome the SAC back. Welcome back.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Caroline Strickland, and I'm honored to serve as chairperson for the Shrewsbury High School Student Advisory Committee during the 2024 to 2025 school year. Thank you for having us here tonight, and my fellow members will now introduce themselves.
I'm Noah.
Emmanuel.
I'm Kelvon Sango.
And I'm Gayatri Iyer.
All right, we'll start with the section titled Student Life. With the start of the 2nd semester, students continue their commitment to academics and new programs have been introduced. Student general feelings. As we enter the latter part of the year, there's a flurry of events preparing students for the next or commemorating seniors' final stretch of high school. The traditional 50-day breakfast date fell on Ramadan this year, and therefore has been changed into the 30-day breakfast, ensuring that all students, regardless of background, are able to participate. Election season is also upon us as members of the freshman, sophomore, and junior class gear up to run for class officer positions, student council, the board of clubs, and of course, the student advisory committee.
For juniors and seniors, APs are transitioning into the final stages of learning and review. Seniors have begun to review what their final weeks of school will look like, and juniors are being introduced to how exams will work following April break. That said, regardless of what courses or class students are in, all are being encouraged to keep up both their grades and attendance.
Regarding our school's music groups, SHS's band, chorus, and orchestra students recently made a 4-day-long trip to Disney World in Orlando, Florida. Besides enjoying the location, rides, food, and attractions, these students also played musical pieces at Disney World as if it were a traditional concert for others to hear and enjoy. Overall, students love the experience and are returning to their music electives as excited as ever.
Recently, with one semester ending and another starting, SHS counselors have been urging students to think about their future classes. They have been coming in during English blocks and explaining the options students have next year. For juniors, they came in and explained how to use SCORE and the resources we will soon have through it. They explained how to view the statistics of others to help set attainable goals for college applications.
And as the counselors talk to juniors about course selections, many have begun to think more strategically about what courses they want. Both rising juniors and seniors are now open to a variety of electives previously held by their former upperclassmen, being able to choose classes for their career. While this may seem stressful to some, many find it as an opportunity to take advantage of and build necessary skills for jobs in the future. Students have also been interested in the VHS program, taking more diverse courses that pique their interest.
Digital pass system. The school is currently testing out a new hall pass system through the website SmartPass. With this system, students fill out passes independently on their iPads, and teachers monitoring the halls don't have to request a pass from every student. Instead, on their own version of the platform, they'll see a list of names and student ID photos of students who've taken out a pass on their floor. While this is intended to save paper, as passes are numerous and often found littered around the school, the pilot classes testing the program also find that it saves time and serves as a tool to track how much of class students are really missing.
Bullying prevention initiatives. As a result of the updated bullying prevention plan, there's a newly introduced non-anonymous incident reporting form, alongside the already existing anonymous form, which helps aid students in reporting acts of bullying they face or witness. Every assistant principal discussed the plan at class meetings for every grade at the beginning of the semester to ensure everyone knew about these resources. We are grateful our administration has given us this tool to help us foster a more safe, supporting, and inviting community.
All right, we'll now move into co-curriculars. Students continue to participate in the school community outside of the classroom.
Athletics. Within the 2024 to 2025 winter season, many of our winter teams have found success. The boys basketball team won districts for the first time in school history. The ski team managed to become state championships. The boys swim team managed to compete at sectionals, with Christopher Brewski breaking the school's diving point record, and the girls team competing at states. The boys track team attended the D1 state meet, where first place shot putter Darius Gibbons set a new school record, and a week later, high jumper Derek Scheimer set another school record, taking first place at the New England Track and Field Championships. Meanwhile, the girls cheerleading team managed to win this year's district championships. Now moving on to the spring season, trials have commenced, with the crew team having hosted the Ramadan trials, allowing any Muslims to try out a week before Ramadan.
Career development programs. Shrewsbury High School also provides a variety of programs to prepare its students for various careers in the future. One of these programs includes the Blackstone Valley Hub for Workforce Development. Through SHS's partnership with this organization, students have been able to participate in workshops, summer internships, and trips to the Blackstone Valley Hub. Here, students can be exposed to and learn more regarding manufacturing operations and occupations that they can pursue in their future. Other outlets are provided for those who are interested in pursuing other careers like trades. This includes trades such as electricians, HVAC, auto mechanics, and more. Students have been taken to see a variety of trade programs that were presented during a trip at the Porter and Chester Institute, a technical college in Worcester. Speakers in these occupations have also been invited to present at our school during advisory periods. This past December, the founder of Control Point Technologies and the company's office manager spoke about things like how to get into an HVAC occupation and what daily occupations would look like.
Musical. This year's spring musical, Chicago, was hosted from March 13th to the 15th. Members of the band and orchestra came together with Mr. Lapamardo to accompany the show's musical numbers. Across the 3 showings, the 100 members of cast, crew, and musical accompaniment brought in over 1,500 attendees. On the final night, all seniors involved, whether they'd been in 8 shows or 1, were recognized for their contributions to the program.
Club news. Club events have been kicking off with many competitive seasons beginning. The mock trial team won all 4 of its preliminary rounds and advanced to the Fab 14. Not only that, there were 73 people who went to DECA States, with 26 going to nationals in Orlando on April 25th of this year. Also, in the speech and debate team, both national qualifiers have occurred, with 10 students qualifying to go to the National Speech and Debate Association's national tournament in Des Moines, Iowa this June, and 32 students qualifying to go to the National Catholic Forensic League's national tournament in Chicago this May. Lastly, the GSA hosted a very successful ice cream social with almost $200 raised for the club to continue such events for people to learn about queer representation in media and literature, the different pride flags, and important people in LGBTQ+ history.
Events at SHS. Shrewsbury High School and associated programs host a variety of events that enhance the student experience.
Science Fair. The Science Fair was held on February 10th in the Media Center, where topics range from herbicides' impact on stem cells and flies to using AI to sort trash and recycling. From basement experiments to lab work done with doctors, each project was the product of a semester's worth of work. 48 projects were submitted in total, 38 of which by freshmen and sophomores in research methods classes. Following this, the top 12 finishers of our school's fair have recently competed at the regional fair at WPI. The variety of interests and proficiency levels was indicative of the accessibility of resources and support provided by the science department.
Capstone presentations. For the past 2 semesters, 38 members of the class of 2025 have been working on their capstone projects. These efforts culminated in presentations hosted throughout January. While every student displayed a tremendous effort, some notable presentations tackled the relationship between music and exercise, the meaning of dreams, and those that created coding lessons. As seniors ended their projects, 38 selected members of the class of 2026 began their own capstone projects on the 7th of February.
Black History Assembly. Black History Committee was able to pull off yet again a beautiful performance for the 24th Black History Assembly at SHS. Many of the students and teachers were able to enjoy the various acts that the BHG presented, ranging from a guest appearance from the storyteller Mary Maker, a spectacular fashion show with the help of Fashion Club, and a dance performance thanks to the SHS dance team. With the big theme being From Africa to the World, a celebration of culture and history, the assembly was able to capture the joy and spirit of Africa for everyone in the assembly audience, while still being able to thoughtfully educate both students and teachers alike.
Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is an annual cooking competition at our school where SHS's staff cooks soups or chilies. Teachers who are nominated by a panel of judges as having the best food are able to donate the proceeds of the event to a charity of their choice. This year, 14 teachers participated, and Mrs. Sino and Miss Quesos were voted as chili and soup champions, respectively. The more than $300 raised from this event will now go to support the Worcester County Food Bank and the Perkins School for the Blind. Along with this, Mr. Oliveira and our school principal, Mr. Bazidlo, won the People's Soup and Chili Awards, respectively, where they were nominated by popular vote from the participants of this event. So congratulations to our guests in the audience and People's Chili Award, Mr. Bazidlo.
Congratulations to Mr. Bazidlo once again, and thank you for your continuous support of the Student Advisory Committee. You will now be open for any questions.
Great, thank you very much for the report. Colleagues, questions, comments? Ms. Heffernan?
Yeah, I always love this and love to hear about all the different things happening, and it is a hopping building from early in the day till late, and so I know there's a lot going on, and I appreciate many of the items that you touched upon. I'm curious to know, you mentioned at least a few different clubs where students have done really well and they're going on to big trips, and they're going to Orlando or Des Moines, and I'm sure everyone's just as excited. But I'm just wondering, from your perspective, something that we've thought a lot about. We lowered the student activity fee a few years ago because we wanted to make sure kids could always engage in any of those activities, and that wasn't a barrier. But I know some of those trips can turn out to be pretty pricey, and so do clubs try to do fundraisers to help? And I guess from your perspective, do you know of students who maybe are like, oh, I got to go, but I can't go? And I'm just wondering, I'm sure the school is thinking about this as well, but as students, kind of what you hear about that tension, because it's exciting to win and to move forward in any of those competitions, but if that's something that students struggle with, particularly ones who maybe are looking to go to college and are trying to save up, these can be wonderful experiences that can be so rewarding, but I'm just curious your thoughts about that.
Well, I know for the Orlando trip, at least, it cost around $2,000 out of pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And I have heard some people saying that that's a reason why they chose not to attend. But as for the speech and debate and other activities like that, I haven't heard anything about the cost.
There's usually a lot of fundraisers. Like, they usually host things in accordance with different, like, restaurants, like Chipotle, Panera, things like that, where they get a portion of the proceeds from that.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it helps a lot. And I know for the speech and debate team, there's organizations that do fundraisers or like coaching lessons where they teach kids at camps. And so they earn a amount of money from that. There are still some kids who need the help,
Right.
which they usually coordinate a lot of things with the captains and the coaches of the teams, which obviously do help. But there are definitely some limitations for some students.
Right. No, thank you very much. And so, really appreciate all the ways in which there's so many items that you touched upon, which are about are trying to create an inclusive environment, right? And that's just one of the things that we're sort of always thinking about. I know it's important to you, Dr. Sawyer, and to others to make sure we lower those barriers. The fact of the matter is a trip to Orlando is expensive. And so how do we both make sure those opportunities exist? And I think probably students and parents want even more of those opportunities and want to see it tied to immersion programs and international trips and all of those. So it's a balancing act as a public school, but I appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Fritz?
Can you explain what SCORE is? You mentioned that students use SCORE. What is that?
So it's just an app or a site where people can start their college application process. They can look at colleges that they might want to go into, kind of like join their college in terms of keeping up with their news and following up with different things that students are doing in order to get into the schools, so that they can look into what those schools really want and look for as a student applying to their program. And so they just get kind of insight from the school itself on what they should do, and look at the statistics of other students in order to help them do it. I know some of the seniors have already started using it.
It helps you see where you are at in terms of the admitted students from Shrewsbury High School, the rejected students from Shrewsbury High School, so you kind of know where you stand. But it's also the platform that counselors use to send your letters of recommendation and your transcripts to other schools as well.
You may remember, Ms. Fritz, prior to SCORE, we had a program called Naviance.
Yes.
And so
right.
this is the
This is the
successor
new- okay.
program to Naviance.
My kids had Naviance. That's why. What's SCORE? And so it's something that you can do on an app at home.
Yes, it's on our iPads.
Yep, so you can do it anywhere you are while you're thinking about all of this. Great, thank you.
Ms. Boucher?
Mentioned Ramadan a couple times in your presentation, and it made me think about the no homework weekends that we've put in place. So just kind of wanted to see some feedback on how you think they've been going so far this year in terms of around religious holidays and other events.
I know from comments from my other friends, they really appreciate the no homework weekends around these religious days, because they do talk about how sometimes it just gets tough to think about work and trying to get through Ramadan as well. So they really truly appreciate these no homework weekends.
Yeah, especially because there's so many activities that they usually end up doing during Ramadan for their religious purposes, and so obviously it's very appreciated by them. I think that's the same for various other holidays as well, especially for religious purposes. I
Ms. Riefenborn?
I love when you all come to visit us, because you really are the eyes and the ears, and you can tell us exactly what is happening at the high school. It's kind of hard to believe that we are already at this point in the year that we're starting to think of next year. Also, really disappointed that Mr. Bazidlo did not bring his chili with him today to share with us, but that's neither here nor there. But since we're now at that point that we're thinking about next year, clubs, classes, for those of you that are picking classes for next year, are there classes that you wish that we had more of? Do you feel like when you're building your schedule, you're like, I'd really wish there was more literature or there was more business? Is there something as you're kind of going through your schedule that you're like, I really wish we had more at the high school?
That's a pretty interesting question. I mean, I personally didn't really think that there was much, except the fact that obviously freshmen don't get the same opportunities as older or upperclassmen. But obviously that kind of makes sense. But I mean, there's a lot of opportunities through like VHS, where if you aren't offered it through the school, you can take it through the online program. So I personally don't think there's that many classes that you could add.
I do hear quite a few people talking about the food and consumer science courses. It's pretty difficult to get into some of those classes that's focused on foods, Mediterranean cuisine. Those usually have a lot of competition, and I often hear some people talking about which classes they get and which classes they don't get, and that's usually on the list of
Same with
the don't get. And ceramics as well.
I think another one is the main science classes, the biology, physics, chemistry. Other than the project lead the way and single semester electives, you can't double up on the main science classes, which it's not something the whole school wants, but there's a group of
There's a
students.
subsection. Yeah.
Overall, on course diversity, I feel like the main courses that SHS provides would be pretty diverse in general. If not the main courses, if we're looking at electives, we have world religions, ceramics, arts, music, science,
Business.
ocean
Electives,
geography, business,
electives,
stuff like that. So I feel like
There's
overall,
a spread.
yeah, there is a pretty decent
Physical
spread.
ed aspect of it as well. Like, looking at the physical ed, remembering they even added more courses for like officiating as well. If you ever feel like, yeah, which I found like pretty fun, because like I know as an athlete there would be times where I feel like it'd just be nice to like pick up a new skill such as officiating, which can be important down the road.
Right.
So I feel like I wouldn't say there's like less I feel like we becoming more diversified, especially going on to next year. Yeah, it was a part of the courses presentation that the counselors gave.
John, can you just,
oh, sure.
Mr. Bazzillo, I put you on the spot. Can you,
Recipe.
VHS is a limited number though, right? Because there's a lot you can take, but it's limited each semester?
Can you speak at the podium?
Sure.
Sure. So, right now we have 50 seats for VHS, they're 25 per semester, so students who participate in like advanced placement, VHS, they count for 2 seats, 1 for each semester. So 50 seats total for the year, 25 per semester. We've talked about, we have actually course sectioning enrollment meetings starting on Monday and Tuesday next week with the directors, so I'll have a better understanding of where we stand as it talks about demand. One of the things that Mrs. Wen and I have been talking about this past week is there's been some cuts at the federal level around Department of Education. The Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is not going to continue a grant that we use to offer advanced placement computer science principles. Right now, I know there's 38 students that want that course. How many can actually fit in their schedule, we're not sure. I've asked Mrs. Wen to reach out to VHS to get us a cost for potential seats for that. So certainly will impact student schedules. That was a free grant that we pursued through the department that was funded by the federal government. So yeah, we're kind of at a loss right now, but that we will probably I'll have a conversation with Dr. Sawyer to try and cost out what that will be and look for potential alternatives to offer that at the high school. We'll have more information probably by the end of next week.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just for those watching, VHS is virtual high school.
Right, sorry.
So it's an online opportunity to take online courses during the school day is part of your official course schedule.
And I think that 50 seats is really limited because it's a vast array of really wonderful classes that you can take, but that's a very small amount of students who have opportunity to take that.
Right, and I think some of the courses that we've taken in the past around forensics are being covered through Pathways programming now, through human body systems and biomedical science. So some of the things that we necessarily wouldn't offer in the past that students would take through VHS, we've brought back. But some of the offerings include like AP economics, micro and macro. That's one of those courses we don't offer.
Right.
Somewhat popular. But there's other courses as well, a different language other than the ones we offer at the high school have been, students have taken as well.
Mr. Winsky, just, Mr. Pizzetto, this is like a version of your November. The students ask us, and we turn around and ask you. I'm sorry, but the point about the not doubling up, the AP economics, some things that are sort of popular. I'm just wondering if one of the key decision-making factors for you and your staff is a space constraint, right? I mean, like or are you also trying to balance? Maybe we have some pedagogical reasons why we don't think kids should be in as many sciences, or how much of it is a capacity issue.
Right.
Separate issue, ceramics versus geography, right? But when we know there's some things that are popular, but we're not able to do it, if what the thinking is there.
Sure, what you referred to, one comes down to space,
Yeah.
and 2 comes down to FTE and enrollments, and
Yep.
that comes down to space. So we don't have enough, we'd have to hire more teachers, we don't have enough classrooms. As you know, the high school is about 96% used every single period. You've been there in terms of passing periods. We've changed our bell schedule as a result of trying to accommodate cafeteria and lunchtime, so we went from 3 lunches to 4, bringing 600 people in the lunchroom down to somewhere around 500, which it doesn't sound like a big change, but it is a big change. So space is certainly a challenge, and as you know, we've carved out pretty much every space we could to add either offices or
Yeah.
instructional space. So we're really maxed out. So there's 2 factors that go into that. Certainly the course in space, but also we don't have the space to add additional teachers to add additional courses.
Right. And so it is a bad answer of a kid who's like bunking up with their brother. Like, what if you only have a 3-bedroom home? You're with your brother because that's the only room we have, right? There's no room for for some of it. So I think it's important that students feel heard. We hear you. Or some of the times it's just there's not a lot of options there. So I have no doubt that we want kids to, who want to take, AP Economics or who want to do AP Bio and AP Chem. Like, we're not disinterested in that. We're just having trouble fitting it all literally in the building. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Wensky.
Well, thank you for your report. You're always well prepared. We enjoy having you here, and you're definitely the subject matter experts when it comes to the high school, so thank you so much. I did have a question for you because I'm a technology enthusiast. The digital hall pass, question on that. So today, if I'm oversimplifying this, let me know, but like teachers writing a hall pass to a student that needs to leave the classroom, but with the digital pass, how does that work? I'm just curious.
So there's only been a couple of pilot classrooms that have done this, so it's not on a full scale yet. But what it's been like so far is you log into a portal right now. If it gets moved up, I'm assuming it'll be an app and a bit more streamlined. You click a button that says leaving, and then you show it to your teacher. They give you a thumbs up, and then you can just sneak out with them without them really stopping the lesson.
Sure.
And then when you go past the people in the hallway that are doing their hall duties, they should have something on their interface that shows the people that are supposed to be out on that floor, because the pass system shows if you're going to the 3rd floor girls bathroom or the 1st floor bubbler or stuff like that, so they know exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Right, so it's like a student self-serve model. You
Yeah.
can, and then you show it to the teacher. Got it. I was just curious about that process, so thank you very much for explaining it. And again, thank you for the report. Dr. Sawyer, any further comments?
No, thank you. It's gratifying to hear of so many things that are happening at the high school that have been very successful across a whole variety of things, not only the coursework, but the different kinds of clubs and activities and athletics, and lots of students who are meeting with success thanks to their hard work, as well as the mentorship and coaching of the educators and who are working with them. Really pleased about the people who have qualified for nationals. Again, I do know that DECA did subsidize the cost with certain amounts they had fundraised, as well as my understanding is that they have to actually wear an official blazer when they compete at internationals, and the school and through the club has picked up the cost of those, so people don't have to buy them individually. But certainly we want students to feel that they're struggling with something, and I know that the administration and the nurses also are often a conduit and certainly the club advisors in cases like this around students who might be, to see if there's something we can find and do. I know that Dr. Lazat often gets asked for assistance. And some of these pieces, the burden does fall on the families for a lot of the cost for students to be able to use money that they've earned in different ways. But, we want to try to make sure people are not excluded because of financial reasons to the greatest extent we possibly can. So we certainly want to continue to emphasize that message. But overall, again, very pleased with the variety of things you were able to report on, and that there's many things happening that really speak to the educating the whole student, as they say, academically, as well as socially and emotionally, and as well as lots of these co-curricular pieces that help them develop themselves in ways that they discover where they have talent or and opportunities to thrive that they may not have even thought about when they started high school, and that's exciting. So thank you, and appreciate all your work on the SAC.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
The next item on our agenda is a time schedule appointment. It is a report on the school district financial review and projections. Shrewsbury Public Schools commissioned District Management Group, DMG, in October of 2024 to conduct a comprehensive financial review for the district. DMG shared its initial findings at our meeting on January 22nd and is here to present its future cost modeling projections at tonight's meeting. The DMG full financial review is in our packets this evening. And joining us tonight is Mr. Joe Costello, who is the group director for District Management Group. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. It's great to be back. Tough act to follow.
Yeah.
We have some really impressive students here in Shrewsbury. Wonderful. Okay, so first how should I do this?
Hasn't picked up yet. So I'm going to screen share here. As you can see by Mr. Costello's name placard, this is not his first time here, given the condition.
Yeah.
Well,
There you go.
terrific. Okay. Let me see, can I change this? Oops. Pull up. PC guy here. I apologize for that. Okay, wonderful. Apologies for the delay there. Two objectives for our time tonight. Number one, share the findings from, or reground ourselves in the findings from the historical financial review, including some of those specific opportunities for Shrewsbury Public Schools to consider. And then really dig into the results of the SPS budget forecast modeling exercise. So highlighting some of those specific considerations for you all to consider, and then to take to your colleagues and the select board and all the various leaders in the town of Shrewsbury in terms of how you inform your decision making about the future of education finance in Shrewsbury. Wonderful. In terms of how I'm going to organize our time for the next 20 minutes or so, we'll do just a very quick overview of our work, then dig into some high-level findings from the historical analysis, again, to really ground the conversation for the implications for future budget projections and our recommendations, and then that 10-year budget forecast modeling exercise, and then we'll close out with some final reflections. You're no stranger to our organization, so I won't go through our whole spiel. One thing I will highlight for those who may be less familiar with us, we're an organization that works with public school districts all across the United States. While we're based in Boston, we really do work nationally. And it really is our belief that a district must focus on meeting the three objectives that you see on the right side of the screen: doing what's best for kids fundamentally, focusing on student outcomes, but then also thinking about what's best for the organization in a way that uses resources prudently. And it's really the combination of those three things that leads to a district's ability to achieve systemic, lasting results for students. Here's just a quick overview of our work in terms of how we reached the findings from all of our various analyses. Again, that deep assessment of historical budgets, comparing Shrewsbury against similar districts and against the state, and then using those findings and learnings to do this budget forecast modeling exercise to really think through what the next 10 years in Shrewsbury Public Schools might look like and how some of those decisions might unfold. And it's really through the combination of all of that work that our recommendations really came to be for you all to consider to really shore up the budget so the district can continue to deliver really top results for students and families. So again, here's how we're going to really divide up our time. This next upcoming section is really a high-level overview of the results from that historical analysis. So, yes, wonderful. This is a slide, again, that we had shared previously, but I think it really does bear reviewing again. Just that Shrewsbury consistently delivers exceptional academic outcomes compared to districts across the state of Massachusetts, frequently performing in the top 15% of Massachusetts school districts, all while spending in roughly the bottom 15% of districts. So again, this chart that you're seeing here represents all districts or local education agencies in Massachusetts. Each dot represents an individual district or LEA. The horizontal axis reflects average per pupil expenditure, and then the height of the dot on the vertical axis represents student performance, in this case, the percent of students meeting or exceeding expectations on the 10th grade ELA MCAS. And as you can see, Shrewsbury is really an exceptional district in terms of delivering strong student outcomes at a relatively low cost, largely due to the exceptional work of Shrewsbury educators and school and district leaders. In the appendix of all of our materials and in our report, there are many more examples of Shrewsbury's strong academic results, but I think it's captured very nicely in this chart here. And then some additional details to underscore within this general context of the financial situation of Shrewsbury Public Schools, because while Shrewsbury is in the bottom 15% of spending across the Commonwealth, costs and spending have been increasing over time. And it's an important story to really get right, because the finances of public education get a little bit complex, especially when you think about town resources compared to state resources and other resources that really combine to make the full size of the pie. And some key points to focus in on here: as Shrewsbury has grown more affluent and Massachusetts has changed its approach to funding public schools to really adjust for community wealth and some of those various details, the state has systematically reduced its contributions to the town of Shrewsbury, which has required more local funding for the school department, not only to keep up with to inflation, but to also cover a larger portion of state mandated services. And so the noteworthy overrides passed by the Shrewsbury community provided these really key infusions of funds to stabilize school funding and respond to some key needs. but as state mandates and growing costs for essential services have required additional reliance on other funds, the Shrewsbury Public Schools have had to seek those funds elsewhere. And so to minimize the impact of funding gaps on students, district leaders have sought funding from alternative sources. So we've heard about fundraising, student fees, competitive grants, all highlighted earlier this evening, in fact, which is amazing in some ways, but also poses some specific risks and challenges for the district. And so essentially, while the increases in spending are noteworthy, it's important to get a really clear understanding of the district's financial situation compared to other districts in the state, to really understand how costs and spending in Shrewsbury compare to comparable districts and also districts all across the state. So to really understand education spending in Shrewsbury, we conducted a benchmarking analysis using 13 comparable districts based on similar demographics and characteristics. So this analysis really highlights how Shrewsbury's spending compares against other districts. And so we used DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We used a lot of their resources, their databases, for running some of these comparisons that we then used as a base to run our analyses. You can see the full set of districts that we used to compare against Shrewsbury for the full scope of our analyses. And at the highest level, the comparison we looked at was per pupil expenditures. So the chart that you're seeing here, sorry, the numbers got a little warped in our transfer here. But you have three different bars. The bar on the far left is the total per pupil expenditure on average for the state of Massachusetts. The light blue column in the middle is the amount for those same 13 comparable districts that I highlighted on the previous slide. And then that light blue bar represents the total amount for Shrewsbury. So even with those recent and necessary increases in spending that I highlighted a couple slides ago, Shrewsbury Public Schools is still far more efficient than peer districts, spending 13% less than comparable districts and 18% less than the Massachusetts state average. And it's important to note here that these figures include all funding sources, including student fees, competitive grants, fundraising. And that's really how the Department of Education at the state level does its calculations to be able to produce these apples to apples type comparisons. I think what's really interesting, though, is the detail that lives inside of this specific data, which I'll highlight on this next slide. So the slide that you're looking at here is that same exact data as the previous slide, but we broke all of the specific expenditures into their specific budget categories. And again, I apologize, the formatting is a little wonky here, but essentially each one of the colored slices in those bars correspond with a very specific kind of budget expenditure. So the largest one on the bottom is expenditures on teachers. The navy blue is insurance, retirement programs, and other benefits programs like that. Purple is pupil services, green, other teaching services, operations and maintenance, etc., all the way up, really representing the full selection of different kinds of expenditures going towards public education in Shrewsbury. And it's really, this is where the key differences across these budget categories that highlight where Shrewsbury's spending diverges from some comparable districts. So this slide here really tells the story for what accounts for the difference between comparable district per pupil expenditures and Shrewsbury. So what you're looking at on this chart, you have the comparable districts, that same selection of districts on the far left, so $19,533 on average spent, and then the Shrewsbury amount on the far right-hand side. And then each one of these bars in the middle really shows the difference, making up the difference between comparable districts and Shrewsbury Public Schools. And you can see for almost all of them, save for other teaching services, which is paraprofessionals, some other related staff members like that, and instructional materials, Shrewsbury is well below its peer districts. And so really, aside from insurance and retirement programs and operations and maintenance, which are covered by the town of Shrewsbury, the difference between Shrewsbury and comparable districts largely comes from spending on teachers, instructional leadership, and administrators. So that's what's making up the pretty significant difference between comparable districts and Shrewsbury. And just as a side note, while Shrewsbury does spend a bit more on other teaching services due to above average staffing on paraprofessionals, and some instructional material costs that are a little bit higher because of some one-off expenses, some one-time expenses. It's important to note also that This data represents one snapshot in time from the most recent data that's available, 2023. So some of those, some of the expenses, particularly in that instructional materials category, would get evened out over the course of time if you were to look at this data over the span of 10 years or so. But again, looking at this data over time shows that shows how these trends really bear out, and how the differences in spending in Shrewsbury compare to similar districts all across the state. So in summary, Shrewsbury Public Schools have been really strong stewards of financial resources and deliver strong outcomes for students and families in a really cost-effective way. However, while cost-effective, Shrewsbury faces several risks that may undermine its ability to continue to deliver strong outcomes for students and families in the future. So in this portion, I'm going to highlight three specific risks that are facing the district from our perspective. The first is this reliance on some of those non-local funds, so funds not appropriated through the town budget, just in terms of the riskiness or unreliability of some of those different resources. So as I mentioned before, due to that adjusted state funding formula, SPS has required more local funding to keep up with inflation, to just maintain the same services that you all have continued to provide, and then cover a larger portion of state mandated services. And as a result of that, SPS has come to rely on some non-local funding sources, again, some competitive grants, philanthropy, student fees, et cetera, to cover some of those gaps in funding, which is inherently unreliable and can create inequities for students and families. Second, the evolving needs of students in the district and the growing complexity of serving students, given increased mandates from the state of Massachusetts, has led to the need for more and different kinds of programs. So evolving student needs and increasing populations of students with disabilities, students with more complex needs and multilingual learners, et cetera, require evolving and potentially more costly programming. Additionally, other shifts in educational programming, including vocational education, pre-K services, et cetera, may also require additional investments by the town of Shrewsbury. And then third, a stretched staffing model that asks so much of its leaders and staff. So because the staffing ratios for Shrewsbury Public Schools are much lower compared to comparable districts, that in turn asks a lot of those individuals who are positioned to provide those different services for students and families. So at a high level, SPS leverages a really efficient staffing model compared to its peer districts that risks becoming stretched too thin. In particular, two categories we wanted to highlight were leadership, so administrators, and then clerical staffing levels, which are significantly below comparable districts and state averages, which again creates this system that relies on really strong individuals who may be difficult to replace as the demands of those positions increase. So there's much more detail in our final report on each of these specific risks, but it's really with these risks in mind that we crafted specific recommendations for the district to consider. So here we highlight the 4 recommendations. Again, all 4 of these are built out in full in our report that Shrewsbury Public Schools might consider pursuing that would really reinforce its commitment to delivering strong academic outcomes in a cost-effective manner while stabilizing its schools for future generations of students. So I'll just share a quick summary of each of these recommendations, knowing that the final report provides really extensive details and implications related to each one. So the first is secure necessary local funding for those mission critical services. So some of the key areas that we had highlighted previously, make sure you have the sufficient resources for some of those key positions, specifically thinking about administrators, thinking about clerical staff, thinking about teaching staff for right-sizing schools, et cetera, things like that, making sure that instructional materials that are critical to the experience of students are funded with resources that are a part of the local budget and not subject to competitive grants that may come and go. Going along with that first recommendation is the second recommendation, which is reducing reliance on non-local funding sources. So what we're saying here is specifically reducing the district reliance on non-local and potentially unpredictable funding sources for some of those mission critical operations to really safeguard those services for students and ensure equitable student access, and shift the use of grants and philanthropy, because we know that those resources play a really critical role to provide services and experiences for students, but shift those resources towards more supplemental programs and materials, things like that. The third recommendation we have is to adopt a formal process to evaluate the effectiveness of new and existing programs to ensure continued strong outcomes for students and families. One of the other aspects of our work, we conducted or created 2 case studies on sort of the academic return on investment of some specific district initiatives or district programs. And using that kind of a framework can really pay dividends for the district and the community to showcase how your investments are leading to really strong outcomes for students, thereby shoring up additional resources in the future just to make sure that everybody sees the wonderful impact of those various investments. And so an academic return on investment type framework can be really powerful to help district leaders continue to make informed decisions about resource allocation and really make the case for how dollars are leading to really strong outcomes for students. And then the fourth and final recommendation is to review educational programming models. So the context here, as the demographics and the needs of students have evolved and programming has evolved to follow suit, there's potentially an opportunity to review some of those educational programming models that serve students with some of those more diverse needs, particularly for those programs that have experienced significant change, so maybe in the realm of special education, multilingual services, things of that nature, to really uncover opportunities to both improve outcomes for students while also continuing to manage costs in a thoughtful manner. So again, four recommendations that can help guide the future of Shrewsbury Public Schools operations. So with these risks and recommendations in mind, we really embarked on this next portion of the work, which was examining how the next 10 years of budgets in Shrewsbury might unfold through this budget forecast modeling exercise. So to start, we constructed a bottoms-up forecast for Shrewsbury Public Schools. And to inform this budget forecasting exercise, my team conducted multiple interviews with Shrewsbury Public Schools leaders and cross-referenced those learnings, so getting a really deep understanding of current expenditures and historical expenditures, and then cross-referenced those learnings with market research, benchmarking analyses, and input from leaders in education, finance, and policy more broadly to really build this forecasting model. And then before building our forecast, we took all of those relevant insights and collated them into each one of these Shrewsbury Public School budget line items. So the left-hand side of the screen shows the full breakdown of all of the different costs or investments, if you will, in the Shrewsbury Public Schools budget. And based on this analysis, so we literally went line item by line item, making predictions around how we would expect some of those cost items to change over the course of 10 years. And then using those specific assumptions, we were able to generate some high-level models to understand how the district budget might grow. And through this exercise, we concluded that the overall budget is expected to grow at 4.7 to 4.9% over the next decade based on the combination of all of those individual forecasts. In the same breath, it is critical to note that the strategy employed by the school committee regarding how the district chooses to invest its resources will be one of many significant drivers of cost over the next 10 years. So it's really the strategy of this group, how and why different resources will get invested in different areas, that ultimately is going to be the largest driver of cost in any one of these single categories. So there's additional details on the technical side. I'll spare you those details. It's on the screen. It's in the report. But at a high level, that is the approach that we took. And then to really dig into the weeds here, we focused even more carefully on some specific budget line items that we expect to experience either greater inflationary pressure or an articulated need for investment. So some of those key areas that we had highlighted where Shrewsbury is below its comparable districts. And through each of those, we went into great detail to really think through how some of those cost drivers might change. And then for the line items in gray, we expect those to follow a relatively baseline growth rate really tied to expected inflation for each of those cost categories. So again, combination of expected inflation and how the town of Shrewsbury and the Shrewsbury School Committee and the Shrewsbury Public Schools choose to invest resources in each of those areas. So in our report, we provide detailed rationales for how we expect each of those budget line items to evolve over the next 10 years. Here's just a snapshot of that information. So again, those same budget categories, a summary of the forecast, so how we would expect those growth rates to evolve over time, and then specific rationales for each of them. So there's a lot of detail related to how and why we would expect some of those cost drivers to change. And the next slide is really a continuation of all of those details, concluding in that bottom line of that 4.7 to 4.9% annual growth expected by FY35 using a compound annual growth rate. And then on this next slide here, this details really takes all of the information from the previous two slides to document individual growth projections for each of those budget line items for each of the next 10 years. So again, same budget line items, and then a column for each of the subsequent fiscal years with the expected projected growth rate that were then used to build out the more detailed cost projections. Really important detail here, we're projecting out costs for the next 10 years. These figures are understandably unpredictable, and the further out the projections are from today, the more unpredictable projections may be. But it's still a really helpful exercise to go through to really think through how certain kinds of costs may evolve over time. And again, finally, those projected growth percentages were used to generate the total value of each of the budget line items in dollars. So that's what you're seeing here in very small font. And this approach is really what gave us that final expected growth rate ranges of 4.7 to 4.9% compound annual growth rate. The data that you see on this slide is the higher end of the projections. We did the same exercise with a lower end set of projections, but ultimately that is what is leading to this range of expected growth rates. And again, just one final point with all of this information. While each of these categories will be subject to inflationary pressures, and inflation may play out differently depending on different kinds of costs, whether that's transportation or labor or instructional materials, technology, things like that, ultimately the town and district resource investment strategy will be the biggest influence on expenses over the next decade. So with that, I just have a couple concluding reflections. So really from our work with Shrewsbury Public Schools over the last several months, there are three reflections that I want to close with. Hopefully this is what people walk away from this exercise with. First is that is just how Shrewsbury Public Schools is a highly effective and well-managed school system. We work with school districts all across the United States, all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You deliver excellent results for students and families and really do serve as a model district in Massachusetts. But despite your efficiency, the district faces some challenges that may impact long-term student success, largely because of rising costs and plateauing revenue, and something that I think bears repeating. I know others have spoken about this. These are trends that are playing out across Massachusetts and across the country. And while things in Shrewsbury Public Schools are stable right now because of the careful planning, like namely from you all and your colleagues on the select board, the district won't be immune to some of these challenges in the future. So sustaining Shrewsbury Public Schools' excellence will really require strategic risk management. So again, going back to those three risks that I highlighted before, and then considering some of the recommendations that our report includes. But then ultimately, the success will hinge on the continued collaboration among district leadership, town leadership, and the community to really continue to invest in Shrewsbury Public Schools for the students and families of Shrewsbury. So with that, I'll turn things back to you all for any specific questions or reflections or comments.
Great. Thank you so much for the report. Colleagues, questions, comments? Ms. Fritz?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Costello and your team. This is my 17th year on the committee, and I think I've mentioned to you this is one of the best things in my tenure that we've done. It's really important to look at operational efficiency. And, in a business, that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we're assessing internal processes and resources to maximize output. So for our schools, we're going to be looking at managing our resources, streamlining the processes to improve student outcomes. And how do we do that in an environment where there is a limitation on finances? So we feel having the stable budget from the override was very helpful, but we know it doesn't stay stagnant because educational services change over time, mandates increase, so we have to make sure that we're constantly moving. And I think for me, having DMG, you're a third party, outside expert, confirm what we've been saying. We've always felt that we had an efficient and effective school district, but you have confirmed that for us. And for me, that's the narrative that I hope people understand for Shrewsbury Public Schools, that we do well with the resources we have. And Dr. Sawyer and I have been doing this a long time together, and we've seen a lot of ups and downs, but our student outcomes have always remained high. We've always worked very hard within the budget that the town is able to afford. And for me, the forecast, again, it's a forecast projection. It is not a recommendation, but we feel that it's essential for the Shrewsbury community to understand that these projections are what could be the cost in the future, and it's based on data-driven. It's based on trends as well as the Shrewsbury needs. And we've done a lot of these forecasts in the past, but what's different and new is this is deeply data-driven. We had historical look back, we've analyzed everything. I know with your team, met with us a couple of times to go over all of this and make sure that we all agreed on the percentages for all of those categories that we felt would meet our needs and were also fair financially for the community. So I'm really grateful that this was done. I think education is very expensive. We know that. It's nothing new, but we want to make sure that we continue to work hard to be efficient and effective and that student outcomes stay high. But we do know that we have really high outcomes and we're spending in the lower part for the state average. So I think that's a very important thing for anyone to know. And again, it's just a projection. It is not a recommendation. And we will be looking at this with the select board and the finance committee. And where do we go as a community? And I think that's the biggest piece. As a community, we have to always decide where we want to put our funding and what are our priorities. So thank you very much for your team. It was a wonderful experience working with you.
Ms. Heffernan. Yep.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to do this work with you and to kind of have an opportunity to, as Ms. Fritz said, to kind of step back and kind of make sure, are we on target? Are we doing well? And though those of us who are close to it always want to feel like things are great, it's good to have a fresh set of eyes, that a lot of things are incredibly good. And I have an immense amount of pride in this district and the work of the educators. And as you just said, and education is expensive, right? And so I'm reflecting back here and on the work that our former colleagues, John Samia and Dr. Dale McGee, did as they were members of this board not quite 10 years ago, looking sort of in the future and saying, what can we predict for the future? Because models are models, and they're only as good as they are. But one of the analogies that they used, in particularly when you look at our expenses and the fact that salaries make up 86% of our budget, and that education is not a discipline that evolves in the same way to technology changing. And the example that they use, that Sandy, you may remember given your years on the committee, is looking at farming. And farming in the 1900s, they had an image of a mule and a man following a mule doing farming, right? And farming today, you don't see people, right? And it's equipment and it's technology and they're satellite driven, and how we've been able to sort of change what that system looks like. And then their comparison was an image of a classroom in the 1900s and an image of a classroom today. And frankly, it is still a teacher at the front of the room, some other adults and students, right? And that's really that will continue to be our model, even as we try to think about all sorts of high tech and wonderful, cool opportunities for our kids. So I think what's important here for all of us is that we need to factor in not just sort of inflation, but growth. And growth means a lot of different things, right? Growth doesn't mean the student population is about to explode. That's not what we see, right? That's not what we're talking about. But grow in that, how do we change and how do we evolve and make sure that we're continuing to meet the needs of the students that come before us, of the families that move to this town because of our wonderful education system, and that we're continuing to prepare them for life after Shrewsbury. And what I love about this modeling work that we did is sort of, I think of it as sort of this like three-part, right? That initially we looked at our historical data and how important that is. So like, what do we know from our own data that you are able to overlay? Well, what can we tell you about other districts and other challenges and what's happening in education and how are we thinking about whether it's special education or other particular transportation? Everybody's suffering on the transportation costs, right? We're not alone in some of these. And then you have to look at the local factors that are matters of policy that we decide as a community about who we want to be. And who do we want to be? We want to be a district that says we want more young people to have vocational opportunities. So we see a driver in that cost category over the next few years as we ramp up the program with Lester, and I'm quite happy about that. We want to be a community that lowers fees and addresses some of that volatility, but also some of that inequity of fees that happen. We want to be a community that maintains the class sizes that we have. We could balance the budget. We've made all the classes huge, right? That's one way to do it. That's not who we want to be. And we want to be a community that continues to invest in our curriculum and not fall into habits of the past where we get outdated in terms of our ability to update and then sort of scramble to make up or find a grant, and that's how we're going to decide to modernize with what's the best educational practice. And you lump all of that together and you grow at a rate much higher than inflation. And you grow at a rate somewhere between 4.7 to 4.9%. And lo and behold, when our colleagues looked at this about a decade ago, they got a number pretty similar, around 4.6%. And so, that there is part of the reason to do this work is to check in and see how we're doing and also remind ourselves we're on track in a lot of ways. I'm very happy with our outcomes that we're on track on, but the costs are going to continue to grow at a rate that is higher than the budget can maintain, particularly at the local level, and because the state's not coming to our rescue, the federal government's not coming to our rescue, right? And if anything, there could be a lot more volatility there. So I think we as a community have a really important job to do to kind of understand this. I'm so happy to be a district that is transparent, that says, here's what it is. Look at our numbers. The report's going to be up on the website tomorrow, I think, Dr. Sawyer, if I'm right, that I hope people spend the time with it because that work, I, again, agree with you, Ms. Fritz, is incredibly important for folks to know. And no one likes to pay taxes. I get that. Whether you pay it as a renter and you're in your rent, whether you're a homeowner, whether you're a business owner, right? But this is sort of the community that we want to be. So I'm really excited to have that and to be able to lean on it and say, we've done our work here, and I feel really confident in it as we move forward and think about when and where will the next override have to happen. And I think we have a great agreement and partnership with the town, but that's going to require us continuing to educate the populace about why did we do that and what did we gain from it and what will we continue to gain as we go forward. So again, kudos to your team and the many who are not here with you tonight, who we have had the pleasure of working with. It's really been both a really professional but a rewarding experience. So thank you.
Ms. Rifapour.
Much like my colleague said, I thought that this was an exceptional and necessary exercise that we did, and I appreciate all the work that you did, Maggie and Yosh and Rishi and everybody that was behind the scenes. This was really great for us, and we wanted to have a full picture, and we have a full picture. And this, again, it was important that we looked at us and our trends, but other districts and the reality of how do we finance school? And school financing is so complicated. It's not easy to pick apart. But I think this is a really good stepping stone, especially for anybody that is going to read this report. This is a really good way to start to understand that and to see maybe where you can ask questions. And I would love for people to ask us questions. I think what's really important with all of this is that this is a community discussion. Part of what drove this is us listening to what do we need as a district. This is coming from what do students need, what do teachers and staff need, what do families need, and that's driven that we need CTE extra in our high school, that we need to have that vocational access. We want to make sure that students have access to the clubs they want to be in, part of that they are going to sports, that they can afford to try out for sports, because sometimes that makes them a better student. And that we're looking at who are our students and what their needs are, because not every student is the same student. And that is a really important conversation to have as we're thinking about our budget and moving forward. So I think this is really great, and I really do want the community to take a look at this. I know it's a lot of information. I know it's a lot of numbers, but I hope that this opens up a discussion. This is certainly going to open up a discussion for us as we go into a tri-board meeting with the select board and on the finance committee to sort of look at where we are and where we'd like to be going forward. And this was hugely instrumental. This will be a huge tool to us going forward. So I really appreciate all of your work on this.
I would just also like to echo my colleagues' comments of gratitude. Just thank your team for the excellent work. It's been a great partnership. We really appreciate the analysis provided with regard to the historical budgets and providing us with some guidance going forward and looking at the budgetary risks that we do face. I think pointing out, especially the reliance on non-local funds is really important because it's just something that we've kind of has been baked in for a long time for us, and to kind of have somebody kind of pull that out for us and especially show us in really some nice graphic displays on how dependent we are. And we really appreciate the expertise that you've brought to this, having a third party, a fresh set of eyes, look at all of this information for us and provide your analysis has been really extremely valuable. And as everyone has said, the 10-year budgeting forecast, it's just going to be very important to us and helpful as we look forward and see and analyze this information and where do we want to go from here with as a community as we plan for the future. So we just love to extend my gratitude again and thank you very much for all your assistance with this project.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, we are very appreciative of the partnership and the outstanding work that we've had with DMG since October. Obviously a very well-respected organization working with 450 school districts nationwide, so you've seen it all, I'm sure. And this was truly a deep dive, right, of our historical data and the hours of interviews with district leadership, school committee members, key stakeholders. It was a very deep look at our school district. And I think the value to the community, from my perspective, is just that validation from an independent third party, right? Year after year, we're reviewing data, and we're certainly showcasing how well this district performs, but to have a third party validate that, both from a cost-effective, cost-efficient perspective, I think is outstanding, but also kind of that 10-year future forward projection of the potential financial needs of Shrewsbury Public Schools. I think, including, factoring in the trends seen across public education, extremely valuable to the community, very transparent assessment of what it might take to deliver these services moving forward. I do appreciate the strategic risk management reference there. I think, in particular, the dependency on non-local funds. When I hear that, I think about the generosity of our community. I mean, we saw it here tonight, with Central One, right? Last year in FY25, I think we had about $640,000 in what would be categorized as non-local funding, in addition to donations. We also think about the time and effort it takes to submit for grants and to maintain those grants. It's a lot of time and effort from our staff. So I think that's important. And as Ms. Fritz said, and as it's been said before, these are projections, right? I think sometimes when people see percentages, it's coming across like an ask for a year-over-year increase. It is truly a projected needs assessment based on the understanding of where Shrewsbury student needs could be in the future. It's not a recommendation for what our school budget should be. We know that. We were asked for projections last year, and here it is, essentially. And we encourage the public to go to our website and take a look at the report and certainly provide any feedback that you have. Ms. Fritz? Yeah.
Are you done?
I'm done.
So I'm thinking two things, just because it was full circle, because the recommendations are a big piece of this. We have 4 recommendations that we now as a committee have to take back and really take a deep look at to see where we can do better. Even though we are efficient and effective, any organization can always do better. So just so everybody knows, there's 4 things we need to look at as we move forward. So it's a really full, complete. And Lindsay and I are on the finance subcommittee, and this was opening up our school district to some scrutiny and looking at a very transparent process. We weren't sure what the outcome was going to be. We felt it was a well-run district. So thank you to the rest of the committee, and Dr. Sawyer and his staff for also participating. It was a lot of work in a short amount of time. Mr. Costello did most of it, but there was a lot, it was a lot done.
Wonderful team.
Yeah, a lot done. So again, thank you to my colleagues, because this was really opening up ourselves for criticism and analysis. And I'm really glad we did it, and that we have this document to move forward as we go into the next phase of what our Shrewsbury Public Schools is going to be going forward.
Well said. Thank you. Dr. Sawyer, further comments?
Thank you. I appreciate the report and the work that DMG did. They've been excellent partners for us. I want to thank Mr. Girardi. He did a lot of the legwork to make sure DMG had everything they needed in terms of data and information, and they were a highly professional organization. We really enjoyed working with them, and I think it does, for all the reasons stated. I won't belabor them. I think a really good exercise for the school district to go through. It's a very valuable report, certainly gives the leadership team things to look at in terms of future planning and trying to make sure we continue to be as effective as we can be within the resources that we have, and that cost effectiveness has been a hallmark of our district, and I think that validated that and gives us some opportunities to think about how we can best do that going into the future. So much appreciated, and thank you.
Great.
Mr.
Thank you
Wensky,
so much. Yeah.
I want to just really appreciate, and we're going to let you go, I promise, that the opening up our books is not an easy thing to do, and there are some places where we have some work to do, right? And some numbers that we want to pay attention to and think about, are there ways to bring them down? What would that do for services, et cetera? But I think it's important that we also maybe go a little bit above and beyond what we might often do of just posting this up on our website. I'm thinking maybe this is the kind of report that we have nearly 1,000 staff, right? There's a lot in here about salaries and staff, right? Like, how can we get that out to them? How can we get this out to parents? And so I want to just propose, Mr. Wensky and Dr. Sawyer, that we think about some communications to kind of push this out a little bit above and beyond our find it in the meeting book, and make sure that we've shared it with the finance committee, at least summaries, and I assume we'll send a copy out to them. I think we'd said we would do that, and certainly the select board has had a chance to look at it. But as we said, the schools are our community, and so both we're large, and we recognize that. But here's a chance for people to really dig in. So I would encourage us to think about how to as best we can push this out.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a time schedule appointment. It is a report for the FY26 English Language Education budget. Tonight we'll receive an overview of the English Language Education program at Shrewsbury Public Schools, as well as an FY26 budget overview that highlights key budget investments. The report is enclosed in our packet, and tonight, in addition to welcoming Ms. Amy Clowder, who's the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment, we also have the Director of English Language Education, Ms. Christina Manos, and the Coordinator for English Language Education, Sarah Woodlander. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
I have the privilege of working with lots of talented leaders in this district, but whenever I spend time with Christina and Sarah, I get smarter. I'm sure that their presentation will help you better understand the English language education and their role in concert with their department and furthering the needs of our students. Most importantly, I think their presentation will help you understand the impact of budget decisions on student outcomes. I'll turn it over to you as soon as I can figure out how to make it project.
Presentation mode?
I will.
I can't figure out which glasses do I want to see up close, do I want to see far away? It's a really difficult age.
All right, well, thanks for having us tonight. And I'm going to just start with a quick reminder of some of the terms that you'll hear us use tonight. Here we go.
There we go.
So a dual identified student is an identified English learner who also has an IEP. An English learner, otherwise known as an L, is a student who is not yet proficient in English. A FEL, or a former English learner, has achieved the proficiency level needed to exit our program and enter the 4-year monitoring period. Multilingual learner, or ML, is a term that we see more and more often right now, and we follow DESE's definition of this, and that is for students who are consistently exposed to more than one language. So this is a little bit broader and includes Ls and FELs, but also heritage language learners and world language learners too. Newcomers generally refers to students who are new to the country and new to English. And SLIFE students, of course, students with limited or interrupted formal education. The next few slides just give you an overview of our program this year. So in Massachusetts, DESE requires schools to have an SEI program, Sheltered English Immersion, and students learn English in their ESL classes as well as their content classes, their sheltered content classes. So language development happens in both of these components. The next slide will give you an overview of our numbers this year. So we had 330 identified Ls as of October 1st on the SIMS data collection date, the majority of which were at the elementary level. And of course, things change throughout the year. So as of this afternoon, we have 359 identified Ls K to 12. So the next slide takes a look at our staffing for the 24-25 school year. And of our 20 full-time educators, 2 of those are long-term substitute positions. One was added at Beale last fall, so October 2023, and one was added after the start of this school year to meet the increasing instructional needs at both Beale and Spring Street School. We were also able to use Title III funding to add a half-time tutor position at Sherwood Middle School. And of course, this is our first year with 2 district-level administrators, myself and Christina Manos, the director.
So just a little over a year ago, Ms. Clowder and I were here to ask you to make some investments in our program, in large part because of the growth we were experiencing. And I just wanted to speak briefly to the value of those investments. Exhibit A and bullet number 1 is, of course, sitting next to me. The doubling of our administrative capacity was huge. Within our department, it gives us more ability to deal with what Amy lovingly refers to as the administrivia, all those things that we have to do according to the guidance that we see from DESE, but also the big picture things. 2 brains are better than 1, having a thought partner and a processing partner to grapple with bigger issues like curriculum and how we're working with the new EL literacy curriculum and all those things is really tremendous. Sarah also brings experience and expertise at the elementary level that I simply don't have. And so her value is tremendous in terms of the ability to look at an elementary school schedule and say, let's try this, 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 and this, and suddenly it all makes sense beautifully. I could use all my time just telling you what a wonderful change this is.
I'm going to chime in.
It's really good. Well, I want to say one more thing before you
Okay.
chime in. I think
All right.
it's really important to stress that Sarah adds a tremendous value within our department, and myself and all the EL educators are feeling that value, but it doesn't stop there. And what it has done is really allowed the leadership in our department to do more of what DESE calls the shared responsibility for educating our Ls. The idea is that we are collaborating with other departments, with other administrators at the building level and at the district level. And when one person doesn't have their head down the whole time dealing with paperwork, we have a lot more capacity to do that. So I think if you polled our building principals, our literacy specialists, our special educator liaisons and team chairs, they would all say, we're getting more from the L department this year because we have more capacity to do that. And that's, I think, a really important part of that value added that we're getting. Now I'll let you go. Sorry.
Well, you said most of what I wanted to say, except that having been interviewing candidates for the Performing Arts Director, one of the things that happens when you talk to them about having 9 schools is their eyes glaze over a little bit and they start thinking about, well, how am I going to be present in all of those places? And that's a real dilemma that Christina was grappling with. We talked a lot in the past about leading versus managing, because there's a lot of both in the department in terms of adjusting to dynamic populations and emerging needs, but also just in terms of being able to be thought partners because the needs at different levels are changing. And being able to be responsive by having more of a presence in those places and conversations is really helpful. And I think previously Christina felt like if I did this, then I wasn't available to do this, and both of those things are important. It's not that you didn't do an excellent job. It's that I think the job was bigger in scope, especially with the increase in our population, than one person could manage effectively. So we're really grateful that you added that. And I think it's a little uncomfortable for them to talk about that aspect. I'm not uncomfortable about that. I think the other piece is the purchase of the software that you see pictured there means that they're spending less time getting data from me and more time thinking about, so this is the data, how are we going to respond to it, and using that data to inform our thinking about making instructional decisions. So both in terms of personnel and other kinds of resources, the investments that you've made have just made a real difference.
Yes, and the last piece of that I would say is the software, like the ELE coordinator position, is something that benefits everyone, not just within our department, because everyone has access to that data for the students with whom they work. And so you go into a student wellness team meeting and the grade level principal, I don't need to show up with my data because he's projecting it already. So they're using that data and appreciate the ability to really look at longitudinal data as well, which, assuming that we can continue our subscription, will continue to grow over time. So that's an important component as well. I think in spite of the investments that you also graciously made in us, in our department last year, the reality is that the factors that were influencing those needs last year have not gone away. We are still dealing with continued enrollment growth, thankfully not at the rate that we saw last year, but it's still happening. The complexity of the learners in front of us continues to grow. And DESE is also not going anywhere. They are continuing to roll out new initiatives. In some cases, they are fine-tuning their guidance. You thought we said this, but actually we mean that, which requires the ability to respond and to pivot. Sometimes it's a simple small shift. Other times it's really restructuring our systems or creating systems where they weren't before to respond to that. So again, capacity within our department to do all those things is really important.
So Christina mentioned the changing numbers. You can see the significant increase that Shrewsbury experienced along with many other districts in 2023. We spent some time talking a little bit about the rationale for that, but post-COVID, when travel opened up, some of the people who were planning on moving actually did and showed up in Shrewsbury because, as you heard earlier, we're a really good place for kids to grow and learn. More to the point, the graph shows the numbers for 2024 increasing by 10% over 2023. We had that big bubble. So I think it just seconds kind of what you said, that we're really seeing from year to year upwards of 10% of growth. I think the other piece that's tricky is looking at the population changes is that means year to year different schools show different pieces. So, Patton had great needs at some years and lesser needs at other years. And so being able to look at the distribution of students by school as well as the total numbers is really important in terms of thinking about managing teacher caseloads.
Which is our next slide. Here we just offered you a 5-year look at population growth by school, and you can see that when you're looking at the elementary level, we have 3 schools that have had and continue to have significant English learner populations, and 2 schools that tend to have smaller numbers, but if you only have 3 one year and you have 10 then the next year, that's, I can't even do the math at this hour of the night, but it's a pretty significant increase. I think the other thing that's important about this slide, though, is not just the individual school patterns, but to look at the growth rates by level. So district-wide, and I keep saying district-wide, but I just want to clarify, we are focusing on the K-12 population because those are the students to whom we provide Tier 1 ESL instruction. So they're the drivers for our staffing needs and our budgetary needs. We certainly have identified English learners at the preschool level and even sometimes in our RISE program, but the K-12 population is really who we spend most of our time and our resources with. And so if you look at our growth from last year to this year, just K4, that was 21%. So 10% district-wide, but 21% at the elementary level. And the elementary level, because of the way elementary schools are structured, because of the size of some of our bigger ones, because of elementary school schedules and the demands of all of those, are the place where shifts in enrollment require more shifts in staffing. So that's an important consideration for you as well. The middle schools only grew by 7%, and while certainly the population, for instance, at Sherwood is significantly larger than it was when I was a teacher there, it's still manageable with our staffing model of an EL teacher at each grade level. But at the elementary school, we just don't have that luxury. And at the high school this year, we actually had a 9% decrease in our population as of the October 1st deadline, but we're back up to 59 at this point in the year. So I think sometimes it's just a matter of when students are moving in and out. Again, a topic that we addressed last year, it's not just more students, it's more complex students. We have more newcomers than ever before. Over 60% of the students who enrolled in Shrewsbury either came to us already identified as English learners, or we screened them and identified them as English learners, are what we call newcomer students. DESE guidance says that newcomers have 2 to 3 blocks of ESL instruction every day, which means the more newcomers you have, the more instruction you are offering if you're going to be in compliance with what DESE recommends. We also have 45 EL students this year who are considered dual identified, meaning they are both an identified English learner and they have an IEP. Last year we had 35. It's 12.5% of our English language learners who are on IEPs. Last year it was only 10%. So those students require more collaboration. I'm going to say it again, that shared responsibility piece. We are participating in IEP meetings. We are working with special education liaisons to craft schedules to make sure that we are honoring what's on a student's IEP grid and also getting that Tier 1 ESL instruction in as well as we can. And those students often require specialized services that L teachers need to work with special educators to be able to deliver. And finally, our SLIFE population is very unpredictable, but whether we have 5 SLIFEs or 15 SLIFEs, they're students that each one has their own unique needs. And again, we're really doing a lot of collaborating with building administrators and intervention teams to figure out how to best meet the needs of those students. So again, more students and students who need more. Next, please. Thank you. And the last piece, again, we had talked about last year, and I've already referenced this, is the fact that DESE guidance is dynamic, and that's not unique to the L department. That's true across schools and all departments and everything we're required to do. But we do need to be equipped to respond to it, and we need to keep our guidance updated, and we're required to have handbooks that reflect the current guidance and all those things. So as those changes happen, we need to be in a position to respond, and that's where having adequate staffing is really, really important. So with all of that in mind, we humbly come back with a request for some additional investment for this year. The first is we are very happy with our choice to implement the Elevation software. And as I said, it's really making a big difference in terms of streamlining systems for us with our compliance, with our communication, and also with sharing data. And we've invested a significant amount of time this year in learning this system and customizing this system for our needs. And so we would like to continue that. It is an annual subscription. So in order to do that, we would need funding of $7,000 to carry that forward for next year. The second request is an English language education teacher, and I want to clarify that we're not asking for another teacher on top of the ones you saw in our table. We're simply asking to take the ELE long-term sub position that we've had at Beal since October of 2023 and make that a permanent part of our staff and move it into the allocated budget. The numbers at Beal and in fact across the elementary schools support having that as a permanent position. So we're looking for that. The last two are on the smaller side, but they're important for you to understand why we're asking as well. A part of our budget is the money that the district allocates for translation and interpretation for gen ed students. So the special education department is responsible for those services for anything related to an IEP, 504, or students receiving any type of special ed services, and the rest of it comes through us and through our budget as well. So there is money allocated for that, But this year, as of March 1st, we spent as much money on those services as we had last year in the entire year. So if more of our budget, because our monies are commingled, if more of our budget is going to those services, that's less money to provide the materials, the supplies, the texts, and the other resources that our teachers rely on to do their jobs. So we are asking for an increased investment of $4,000 for next year to guarantee that we're meeting all of those services, and interpretation and translation is mandated. It's not a nice to do, it's a must do, but also so that we can continue to have the funds we need within our discretionary spending to support our teachers. The very last piece is the reinstitution, is that the word I want, of a stipend to support our ELE summer program coordinator. Prior to COVID, and for many years, we stood up a freestanding, if you will, not that we were outside, but a freestanding summer program for English learners to give students the opportunity to see their peers and, more importantly, to interact with English during the summer, because the reality is some of our students leave us on the last day of school and may not really be exposed to any significant English until they come back on the first day of school. So we feel like this is an important thing to offer. We've been very fortunate that we've been able to fund this through Title III grant money. We pay teacher stipends and buy materials through that. However, Title III has some significant restrictions around what we can and cannot spend money on, and we can only spend a very small percent, I think it's 2%, on anything related to an administrative cost. So a coordinator would be considered administrative because you're not directly instructing students or providing benefits to students. But the role of the coordinator is important for the teachers to do their job in terms of practical things like reaching out to families when kids aren't showing up, or if a child is sick during the school day, keeping the building secure when the teachers are all with their students. We want somebody on that door at Coolidge and things like that. So this is funding that had been in place before our program stopped with COVID. When Summer Academy was instituted, we collaborated. That's how I landed here, if I recall. And ran our program under the umbrella of Summer Academy, which meant that we could have a shared director rather than having a separate director. But now that Summer Academy is no more, we are back to our own independent program, and we are hopeful to have that funding back so we can have that person in place. You may remember that both of our positions are school year plus 10 days. And our summer program is at least 12 days, so we would use up all our days right there in running the program and not have the days to do all the other important work we do in the summer. So the total for these requests is just under $80,000, $79,200.
So it's my task to kind of sum us up. I think in order to meet student needs and state guidelines and to preserve educator time for teaching and leading, you can understand kind of, we've built systems. We've invested in systems to efficiently screen students, systems to effectively communicate with families, systems to respond to student needs, and the requests you've heard about tonight will help us sustain and strengthen those practices. Under Christina and Sarah's leadership, and together with other district leaders, we found new ways to support ELS this year, and especially SLIFE students, including partnering with DESE. So in addition to learning around effective models, we've also thought about how to apply those learnings. And so the co-taught models at the elementary level that are beginning to develop, the coordinated intervention at the middle level, providing both language support and literacy support, and together with Amy Pryor's work at the high school, access to rigor in math, by adding enhanced academic supports for students are all good examples of those things. I think the increased capacity in the form of a coordinator, who's reluctant to toot her own horn but really should hear that, has helped us to also align these practices across levels. So I'm excited about the opportunities for students that have resulted from your investment. I hope you'll continue to support our growth in this area by recognizing the importance of these key investments described tonight. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for the report. Colleagues, questions, comments? Ms. Heffernan?
Yeah, I am so impressed with what a mighty team of two can accomplish. I'm glad it's two and not one. Ms. Meadows, it was evident to us that the need was there, and so I'm glad on so many levels for that investment and what we've seen become. just say first and foremost, I think the budgetary asks make perfect sense. I have no real questions about those, and I think you're using your dollars in as smart and as savvy a way as you possibly can. When I think about the volatility of this particular population, I just noted you sort of said on offhand, oh, since October, it's actually already gone up. And then you said it was another 29 students. And I quickly did a little math because I'm tired, but I had a minute to think about it. I'm like, that's nearly 10% in 5 months, right? And so just again, the what you're managing and working with, and in your report, and I want to appreciate your report goes into even more detail for us. Let me see if I can find it. You had a note about the I'm on page 8 of 16 of your report, but it was the Shrewsbury mobility rates, and these youngsters have a much higher likelihood of churning through our system, so coming in and being with us for a while and moving out. And a lot of that makes sense, and I certainly understand that. But that we also have kids and maybe families who are a little less stable than the rest of our kids as a cohort. And one of the things that I really appreciate that you wrote about in your report and want to just sort of like click in on for a second is that we think all of us in our various professional lives are like, oh, we had to get a piece of software. You're like, okay, right, we got another piece of software to do a thing, and it's helping you with the data tracking. But for me, the piece that I appreciate in your report is our ability to track student progress with this very complicated population and kids who are churning and kids who are moving. Is it being effective, right? And so yes, you need headcount, and yes, we need the summer program, and yes to all of that, but then how are those kids doing, right? And some of those longer term. So I'm really appreciative that that's sort of built in, and you gave us a little snapshot to sort of show different ways we can measure students' ability to sort of access the curriculum. I'm not sure if that's quite the right term, but you had composite versus listening and speaking and oral and all these different ways we are looking at their language abilities. One of the things that I still find troubling, and I'm glad to see the change, is that our population in Shrewsbury, and this is not a reflection on you at all, but just as I think about how we best serve our students, is that because a student speaks another language doesn't mean that does not English, doesn't mean that they don't have the same complexities that all the rest of us do, right? And we know that in Shrewsbury, for as long as I've been on the committee, somewhere about 16% of our students are identified as a student with a disability requiring an IEP, and even more above that with 504s. I'm assuming you didn't mention it, but some of these kids have 504s as well. And while we went from 10% to 12.5%, I can't help but think that because potentially language barriers make it harder to understand the underlying disability, and or I assume that many of the family members also have some language barriers, which makes it harder for parents potentially to advocate or ask some questions that other parents might ask. And so just want to continue that we have a less stable population, potentially with less roots in the community, who maybe also have some needs that we're still working to identify, and how really hard that is, but how critically important it is, because if we've taught you how to speak English, but then we realize you're actually struggling to read, and there's something else going on, right? How we maybe are throwing stuff at the wall, and there's a reason it's not going to stick. So just want to appreciate, and this dovetails obviously with last time we were here, we were talking about special education and their budget, right? These are kids don't fall into one box. And some of our most complicated kids sit in a few different boxes. So appreciate the efforts there, and know that's something that you have, in many ways, the cards stacked against you in terms of the complexity here, and that spread, the pie chart of all the languages that you somehow did not put in this presentation, which I don't understand. That is like, are you kidding? Wow, I had no idea. I broke it out at my dinner table to show my family, like, look at this, and everyone was zooming in and kind of trying to see that what you're working with, and I can't imagine the complexity of finding translators. And we're not talking about everyone speaking Spanish and Portuguese, right? It is a much more complex dialects, and so just really kudos to the work and the effort. And all of my comments about sort of identifying kids, I recognize, is not just about the EL staff, right? It is a village and a district, but how we make sure that we're not missing kids, and we're kind of picking up what may be something else in addition to a language issue. So thank you very much.
Mr. Riffenbohr?
To tag onto that just a little bit. So with the EL population, they have their own set of assessments that you go through, and you can figure out where they are and what their needs are. But then for the general population too, we have the assessments like STAR. So we need to know where they are based on math and where they are in literacy. How do we manage all of those different assessments? Because, and maybe I'm wrong.
You're making Amy's heart sing.
But maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that we do also have them do the STAR assessments so we can baseline, and that they may need literacy. They may need different variations of interventions that the general population would too. That seems like a lot of different things, especially for students who are just learning, because I think you had data at one point that we're now, so 10 years ago, we were 20 to 30% of students were at the proficiency level of 1 or 2, and now we're at 60% of 1 through 12, grades 1 through 12, and then 75% of kindergarten are at 1 and 2. So that seems like a lot of different assessments. So how do we manage that? And what does that look like for the EL students?
So that's another reason why having software that helps make sense of the data is really important. So we know that students, general education students have the MCAS exam, which is once a year, most grades, and the STAR, which is 3 times a year, that helps us track progress intermittently. ELs also have access testing, so they might have three tests that kind of monitor their progress with specificity in the domains that Lindsay was referencing. I was looking at the numbers. If we assume the numbers before the added pieces you were talking about recently, and we subtract the high school population, 77% of our ELs take STAR so it helps us. They either take about split evenly between the early literacy, because you imagine if you're learning English, you're not yet reading English, and about 40% take the STAR reading. A very small population of the STAR reading kids also take it in Spanish. So we get a bigger picture of kind of literacy from students who are literate in one language and learning English. Their rate of language acquisition is going to be faster. So those decisions are made in consultation, with English language educators, but we have a way of tracking English learners as well. As you've heard me say, one of the things that we're trying to do better with is closing the achievement gap between general education students and students in subgroups, and ELs are certainly one of those subgroups that we're trying to close gaps with. But the vast majority of English learners do take the STAR assessment as well, and that helps us kind of look at what are we seeing as a result of this assessment, and how does that square with the less frequent but more detailed report we get from access testing.
Right. Okay.
Ms. Boucher.
Thank you very much for both your written report, which I found extremely helpful, and the presentation tonight. The incredible diversity that you see in your department, 36 languages of different, it's just, and the other statistic that I find very interesting is that 40% of our student body has a first language other than English spoken at home. Just another point I just wanted to raise, because I just think that the community probably isn't aware of that. I did have a question. I'm fully supportive of your requested budget investments, but I did have a question about the software, and I think it seems like it's an extremely helpful tool for your department. Is there a way to maybe not get it on an annual basis? Would there be any kind of savings if we invested in maybe a longer term contract?
We are certainly happy to go to our
No, I didn't know if there would be some savings there maybe for us, because if it's something that you're going to come back to every year, or if we could go to a more, I don't know if there would be any savings.
A wonderful thought. That hadn't occurred to me, so thank you for elevating that. I also, just to address the language piece, I want to clarify that these languages are only our English learners. It is pre-K through the RISE program, but it's not necessarily reflective of all of the language spoken by that 40% of students in district who have a first language other than English. So
the pie gets bigger.
Yeah, we do have an incredibly diverse district.
First, I want to say I definitely support your budget ask. I think these are necessary things that in the long run will eventually have cost decreases as the students who stay within the district become more proficient and need less services. So getting these services in as early as we can, I think, is a cost savings down the road. So fully support that. And I like that it's after the DMG report, because I think it really underscores this to me, we're in the business of student outcomes. How can we have the best outcomes? Where do we put our dollars? Where do we put our resources? And it talks about this changing student needs that we've seen in the complexity of the needs. And I think, again, mandates. That's a word that we have to always talk about, because mandates continually change and sometimes get more onerous and more expensive, and many are unfunded.
Right.
But we must do that. So I think, it really underscores what DMG found, and this is a population we are mandated. We must serve this population. And I think I've said this to you before, Ms. Manos, like, you're extremely humble, and now Sarah's also humble. And this is a lot of work, and you're doing, and it ramped up very quickly in this district, and you have done an amazing job of quickly hitting the ground running and doing all the right things, but doing it in a way that has always been cost efficient. So thank you very much for all that you do, and you are way too humble.
Thank you.
I definitely echo with the sentiments of my colleagues, and thanking you for all that you do for our students every day. This is a challenging role, and certainly I was recalling the presentation that we made to Finance Committee on Saturday, as I mentioned earlier, and that pie chart that's been referenced many times. We did have in our presentation, and I think the number was something like 396 students speaking 36 different languages. I think that just really jumped off the page, and this is really where we're seeing expanding student needs. And I also think in your report, the 63% increase in that 1 year in 22 and 23, I mean, it's just amazing, and another 10% the year later. And it's good to see that when we're making strategic investments, it's having the impact that you described, certainly with Sarah's role. And we're fortunate to be in a position to make these investments. I did appreciate as well, like, how you described the impact of Elevation, that software program, and kind of how you described it streamlining your processes. I'm curious, like, is there anything that you've learned about that software that was like a surprise to you, that kind of streamlined things even more than you expected? Or
There are some things that the DESE provided templates are just challenging.
Sure.
They give you a Microsoft template and you have to literally do it for each student, or figure out more complex systems, where now we literally have a dashboard for each student. We say we need this report, and lo and behold, we get that report. And it's true for most of our mandated paperwork that they have a report that we can customize to suit our district needs, make sure we are in alignment with what DESE tells us we have to do. And then my favorite line all of this year to our department has been, your data is only good as your data entry.
Right.
And so this has very much been a learning year in terms of working with Eric Bauer to make sure we're syncing everything that we need to sync, and we're syncing the right data points and all of that. It will certainly get even better in the future, but we're really learning how to use that tool to customize to our own needs, making sure we're in compliance with DESE as well. And I think I knew that I was excited that other staff members would have access to this as well, but I literally almost fell over when I walked into a meeting at Oak, and I'm like, I made it to your 8 a.m. meeting, and here's the data, and Scott Yunker had it projected already up on the screen, and like, you preempted me, but that also means that he can find what he needs without me. And that, again, shared responsibility and shared data.
yeah, it means less requests to you for reporting.
Exactly.
Data's right there. He can take a look at it and prep.
And less of a sense, and I hope you'll forgive my repetition of this phrase, but it comes right out of DESE's blueprint and their pillar for English language learner success. This idea of shared responsibility is that I don't own L data. It doesn't belong to the L department, because English learners belong to all of us, and we all have a role in educating them, in teaching them English and all their other tier 1 subjects. We all share that responsibility. And so to have a tool that makes sharing the data easier as well, to me, just underscores that culture of shared responsibility.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm definitely very supportive of the FY26 budget request that you've made.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sawyer, any further comments?
Well, those watching obviously can see the quality of the leadership we have, and I want to, again, appreciate the investment the school committee made. They were able to bring Ms. Willender on board in the new coordinator position. It's had an incredible impact, and the continued excellent leadership from Ms. Manos as well, and Ms. Clouder in supporting them and their department, and all the educators in the department for their hard work that they're doing and skillful work in collaboration with their other colleagues, as you've mentioned, and very thoughtfully referenced in terms of that shared responsibility. So again, we've had a changing student population. We have a responsibility to do the best we can by them, not only because the legal mandates say so, because it's the right thing to do. I think we have a much richer school climate and culture as a result, and I think that this is continues to be a real success story for us for all the reasons you heard tonight. So thank you. I'm very grateful, and certainly support. And my recommended budget has all of their recommendations baked in. These are not extra on top of that. They're all included in there because we thought these were important investments to make, and we look forward to continuing to support that through the financial resources we provide as a school district. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. We appreciate your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
If anyone ever wants to talk more data, that's the other thing, like having this new tool makes me so excited.
You might be asked best to talk about that.
Thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is under Finance and Operations. It is a vote on the MSBA Initial Compliance Certification. In December 2024, the Massachusetts School Building Authority Board of Directors voted to invite the district into the eligibility period for consideration of a potential future building project to expand Shrewsbury High School. The first requirement of the eligibility is to execute the initial compliance certification, through which Shrewsbury agrees to abide by the MSBA's rules and regulations regarding a potential project. A copy of the initial compliance certification document is attached in our packet for review. The MSBA requires that the initial compliance certification be signed by the town's chief executive officer, which in Shrewsbury is the select board, the chair of the school committee, and the superintendent of schools. With that, hand it over to Dr. Sawyer to walk us through.
Thank you, and I know we're running a little behind, so I'll try to be brief in just providing this overview of the process. As you know, the town put in a statement of interest. The Mass School Building Authority, the MSBA, chose Shrewsbury out of a variety of projects of applications across the state because this potential expansion project at the high school hits their second largest priority, which is to relieve chronic overcrowding, and also hits the priority of improving building systems, which would be things like HVAC, roofs, and the like. In terms of the way the MSBA process works, it starts with they call an eligibility period. You have up to 270 days to meet a variety of benchmarks from the point that the MSBA board authorizes it and starts your clock. And our clock started in early March based on the timetable they gave us. There are times to complete a variety of elements, which I'll go into in more detail in a moment. And the most critical is at the latter part of that stage is to secure funding for a feasibility study, because while there is a report that was commissioned, I think very thoughtfully by the town, actually going all the way back when the feasibility study for the Beale School was funded by town meeting. Some money was included to do a capital needs study for the schools. There hadn't been one done since 1997 or 98, I believe. That plan had come to fruition over time in terms of the building of a variety of schools, including the high school, which opened in 2002, all the way through the new Sherwood Middle School and the new Beale. And it was time to look at the building inventory and what made sense. Out of that report, the school committee, based on that recommendation, identified the high school overcrowding as the number one priority in terms of a potential capital investment. There isn't a project yet. This is the process that would bring options for a project forward through a feasibility study, and ultimately a project that would be put before the town meeting and the voters if this were to move forward in the way that our Sherwood and Beale projects move forward under the MSBA. These are the elements of the eligibility period that need to be completed. These are the timelines and when things would become required to be done. And the first is what you'll be asked to vote on this evening, which is the initial compliance certification. That document is essentially to agree to follow the MSBA's rules and regulations around how the process works. It's the sort of the baseline requirement to start the process off. And as Mr. Wensky mentioned, it's signed by the town CEO, the select board, the school committee chair, and superintendent of schools. The next part of the eligibility is to establish a school building committee. They have very specific guidelines and requirements for that. While by their timeline it's due by May 2nd, they have agreed to wait until after the annual town meeting for Shrewsbury, because that's when it would be established per local Shrewsbury regulations. They're fine with that. You can see on the screen a number of positions that must be part of it, and then others would be invited based on an invitation that would go out once the committee is established. Next, after that, due in June, there's an educational profile, basically confirming things like what grades does the school have, what's our current use of space, current educational program, and so forth. The detailed planning of a potential project, what would go into that, it happens during the feasibility study. This is just confirming the profile of what we do now. And then there also is an enrollment projection. There's an online document we complete that's due by June 2nd. And then MSBA looks at that. They do their own calculations around looking at the various data. And then that has to be certified that there's an agreement between the MSBA and the local district on what the design enrollment would be for a potential project that will happen by the end of August. This is just a reminder of the projection that was done by a demographer that shows where that sort of original design capacity of the high school of 1475, what it would be now if MSBA built this project based on evolving needs for space in schools for things like English language education, special education, and so forth. That would actually be 1,250 if it were built today with the same footprint, and what our ongoing enrollment, which is obviously hundreds of students above that capacity. Next step is a maintenance and capital planning documentation. The Public Buildings Division takes care of this for us. This is just making sure they document there's good maintenance practices in place. The good news is that if it meets the MSBA standards, the project's eligible for a couple of extra reimbursement percentage points, which is real money. Both BLN and Sherwood qualified for that. I would expect that this project would as well. Then, as I mentioned, in the fall of this year, at a special town meeting, there'd be a request to authorize, the town meeting to authorize funds to actually do the feasibility study, which means hiring a designer, architect, an owner's project manager to complete that work, both feasibility and schematic design. So that has to be completed by this fall, by November 28th at the latest. And then there becomes a feasibility study agreement that, by a vote of the MSBA board, would move us into the next phase, out of eligibility and into the next module of the MSBA process. So that's what the eligibility process is. The signing off on the initial compliance this evening starts that process off. And then for the whole project, you look at moving through eligibility to the project team, doing feasibility, doing schematic design. Then there would be an actual project that MSBA has agreed to with a price tag that would be put before the town at that point for approval. If that's funded, then you go into finalizing the design, constructing the project, and completing it. So these are some of the next modules that happen: project team, feasibility, and schematic. That's 913 days to complete those. It doesn't happen quickly. Also of note is that of those invited in December, like we were, not until summer 2027 at the earliest would there be a project cost and funding reimbursement rate set by MSBA. And just for reference, for Beal, that percentage was 54.86% that they were paying as far as the nominal reimbursement rate. And finally, there's a potential timeline for the project itself if it moves forward. The funding agreement would happen in August 2027. At that point, there'd likely be a special town meeting vote around being able to spend dollars from a debt exclusion in the fall of 2027, and then the actual debt exclusion vote in the fall of 2027. From that point forward, about 10 months to a year to do the design, finalization, documentation, bidding the project, 2 to 3 years for construction, and then, on an early side, opening the project in August of 2030. On the later side, that'd be more like the fall of 2031. So that's a potential timeline for this project. But this evening, the first step would be that would ask that you would vote to authorize Mr. Wensky and myself to sign the initial compliance certification, and then we'll be working through the rest of the eligibility pieces in the coming months.
Great, thank you so much. Colleagues, questions or comments, Ms. Fritz?
Just a comment, this is procedural. As we sit here today, there's no project design, there is no cost associated with this. That is something, as Dr. Sawyer said, is part of the MSBA process. As we go through the feasibility study, the MSBA takes a look at it, comes out with their funding and their percentage. And I know Ms. Boucher and I served on the Beal Building Committee. It is a highly check and balance MSBA. I mean, they look at everything that is done as we go through. So I think that's this is just procedural. There's nothing that we know that is documented for design or cost as we sit here tonight.
Other comments, Ms. Heffernan?
Yeah, I certainly agree, and I'm highly in favor of the vote. I just need to remind people, Dr. Sawyer, you said, it's a crowded building. Our own analysis done by the town, when we looked at every single school building in the town, we are crowded in the ways that we can't provide core academic services. And so crowding doesn't just mean crowded hallways, right? It means that we are 40,000 square feet down in core academic spaces per their standards, 24,000 square feet down in special education spaces, nearly 21,000 square feet below the standards for vocational and technology, all things that are either required or highly sought after in the district. And so when I think about the presentations we've heard tonight and our requirements and our jobs, frankly, to do this work, plus things like HVACs and roofs that just have to happen on buildings that are coming close to a quarter century old. So if MSBA, there's a long process. It's a lot of steps. It's all very, very true. And if MSBA is going to pay to close to 50% of the cost, if someone's going to pay half the cost to replace my roof, I'd be jumping up and down. And so we'd be silly, frankly foolish, not to vote for such a thing.
Any further comments? Yeah, no, I agree. My colleagues, certainly, we are fortunate as a town to be have been invited into this process to begin with. As Dr. Sawyer said, I mean, there were several statements of interest that were submitted, and very few made it to this point. So, from my perspective, certainly MSBA saw a need for potential expansion at SHS, due to severely overcrowded conditions. Yeah, no, although this is procedural, certainly it's the next step in the process. So. Further questions or comments, Dr. Sawyer? Good. Okay, so we do need to vote on this. So I need a motion that the committee vote to authorize the chair and the superintendent to sign the Massachusetts School Building Authority's initial compliance certification to meet this requirement of the project eligibility period.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, next item on our agenda is FY26 budget fees and tuition vote. So fee information and updates were provided to the school committee at our January 8th meeting and at the March 12th meeting as well. Recommendations for changes in fee levels for the FY26 budget were presented for two categories: transportation fees and high school athletic fees, for review by the committee in advance of a planned vote tonight. So just to recap, the recommendations were to reduce the transportation fee from its current $320 annually, a $960 family cap, to $300, which would be a $900 family cap for 2025-2026 school year. This is projected to reduce the amount paid by families for transportation to by $43,400 next fiscal year, with those costs shifted to the appropriated budget, and then also reducing the high school athletic fee from its current $325 annual fee, $975 family cap, to $300 and a $900 family cap for 2025-2026 school year. And again, that is $28,600 in the next fiscal year that will be shifted to the appropriated budget. Not seen any feedback on this, but I'm not sure if there's any other questions or comments. Ms. Heffernan?
I think, Mr. Wensky, this is just an example of us not only opening our books, having the transparency of DMG, hearing their recommendations, and then deciding to try to implement some of them as best we can in this year's budget cycle. And so we're overly reliant on fees as compared to other districts, and this is one space where we can, it's a small amount, but if you're a family with multiple kids who are taking the bus and who are in sports, we're trying to put some money back in your pocket and make sure those kids can engage. And frankly, you probably got to turn around and buy them some cleats to play in the sport event anyway, right? There's still costs, we know there are for families. So I think it's a smart thing to do, and I appreciate Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Girardi's efforts to sort of survey us and tell us where we are in the landscape, and that unfortunately we are still at the high end here. So thank you very much for all of the effort, Dr. Sawyer.
Further questions, Ms.
I think, pre the first override, the second override, these fees became just part of our budget. They needed to supplement so that we did not have to reduce further either staff, increase class sizes, or programming. And they've continued to rise over time. And now we're in a more stable position with our budget. And I think and as DMG concluded, it's a time maybe we can look to start reducing that dependence on these types of fees that do go to mission critical items. So I agree to start this. We have nothing written in stone that we're going to reduce X amount every year and have some date that this will be gone. I mean, ideally, I personally would like to see this eventually go away, but that will depend on the future budgets and where we stand as a community regarding our school budget. So I fully support this, and I hope we look at this every year depending on the budget.
Further questions, comments? Yeah, we definitely, prior to May 2021, grew a dependency on fees, no doubt. And anytime you can ease the burden on families who are paying these fees, I think it's a win. It's something we'll certainly look at from year to year to see if it's something we can look at and entertain. So.
And I think, to mention, our parents are taxpayers, and they've
Absolutely.
also seen an increase in their taxes. They're dealing with inflation, so any little bit that we can do, I think, is a good thing to help anybody in the community with any of the fees that they're paying.
Absolutely. So, we take two votes on this, two separate votes, or just one? It looked like two.
I would go ahead and do, let me find the page, sorry.
Looks like.
Yeah, I would go ahead and do two.
Okay, so we'll do two separate votes. We'll start with transportation fee. So I need a motion that the committee vote to set the transportation fee for the 2025-2026 school year at $300 per year with a $900 family cap.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Next, I need a motion that the committee vote to set the Shrewsbury High School athletic fee for 2025-2026 school year at $300 per student per season with a $900 family cap.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is under old business. It is the new policy 583 on competency determination for high school diploma and update to policy 582 graduation requirements for high school. Second reading and vote. So the first readings of these of the new policy and the updated policy was conducted at our March 12th meeting and subsequently posted for public review and comment. These policy changes will align the district with the new requirements of the state law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 69, Section 1D, as amended by the ballot question approved by Massachusetts voters in November 2024 by establishing a local competency determination for a high school diploma through required coursework. So, colleagues, I don't know if I've seen any feedback. I don't think I have, but Ms. Heffernan.
No, I just want to really appreciate Vice Chair Sharifapour and Ms. Boucher for the policy committee subcommittee has been very busy this year. Has been a lot of updates. This one maybe wasn't at the top of our list, but obviously with the change in the election, needed to be taken care of. And I think we had a comprehensive presentation on this on our last meeting, and I think it fits the bill of what we need to do and make sure that our standards stay high at the same time. So again, my appreciation to them.
Sure. Further comments, questions? Definitely echo Ms. Heffernan's thank you to our busy policy subcommittee this year and for Dr. Sawyer for his guidance. With that.
Just
oh,
one
sorry.
quick thing, and again, the only feedback that I received was actually from a member of our school counseling staff who did point out that we had used the term school counselor in most of the new policy, but we actually used the older term guidance counselor in one place. So I did send you an updated version that has school counselor, so it's consistent with the current usage of the term. So that's just a very technical change, but it is, that is what's presented to you this evening, the only change from what was presented to you last meeting.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the clarification. So we will take two separate votes. So the first, I need a motion that the committee vote to approve the new policy 583, state competency determination for eligibility for a high school diploma as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those all those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion carries unanimously. And then another motion that the committee vote to approve updated policy 582, graduation requirements for high school.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please do so by saying aye.
Aye.
And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. The minutes from the school committee meeting held on March 12th and the school committee workshop held on March 19th have been provided to us. Any edits or revisions to those minutes? There being none, they'll be accepted as written. Okay. We do need to go into executive session tonight. Therefore, I need to request a motion to adjourn into executive session. A, for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Purpose 7, open meeting law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 22F and G, for the purpose of reviewing, approving, and/or releasing executive session minutes. And B, for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect of the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Purpose 3, the Shrewsbury Education Association, Units A and/or B, the Shrewsbury Paraprofessionals Association and/or the Cafeteria Workers Association. And C, for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, non-union clerical and support staff and/or administration. Purpose 2. And D, for the purpose of addressing Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements, federal and Massachusetts student record laws. Purpose 7, where deliberation in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and return to open session only for the purpose of adjourning for the evening. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote is required. Ms. Fritz?
Aye.
Ms. Boucher?
Aye.
Ms. Sharifipour?
Aye.
Ms. Heffernan?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Thank you and good night.